Okay.
I think you need that soon, probably.
Okay. Can I start?
Yes, Fabio, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to you all to be here. I'm very glad to be here in this congress about inclusion. And I want to thank Professor Scrappen for this opportunity, all the staff of the University of Antwerpen. Well, today we're going to talk about cooperative work among therapists, caregivers, and schools. I know that this topic is widely covered by many scholars and professionals as well, and it's one of the crucial issues we face every day in order to achieve the thing that we call inclusion. I'll try to give a slightly different perspective for you. Well, at a conference dedicated to inclusion, a lot of words have been spent on how to generate inclusion. And on a closer look, everyone has their own personal idea of inclusion. And this idea comes from the situation everyone experiences every day, the laws of their own country, and the state of the art of single situations. Well, okay. Well, other countries, like Italy, with very advanced laws on inclusion, have other kinds of problems. The first and most important one is about the full application of these laws. The second problem is about making teachers and families able to interact in order to achieve an optimal form of inclusion. Today I'll ask you to imagine and think of a place, Italy, where there are no special schools, where the role of the support teacher is central, and where families struggle every day to see their rights and the well-being of their children with special needs recognized. Well, this is useful to you to understand what I'm going to talk about in moments. I also ask you to imagine that in this interaction there is another component, the therapist. This role, that of the therapist, represents not only the part that takes care of the development of cognitively deficient functions, but the one who is in a position that gives the therapy family school triangle a real meaning. Well, today we're going to briefly talk about the trap of considering our job as part of a perfect triangle that represents the relationship among therapist, family, and school. And we're going to see why we need to change our perspective. And to change our perspective to a complex point of view. We're going to discuss how the complexity mindset can help us understand the relations we are facing in our everyday work. Well, every time I see this image, the triangle, I always have a strange feeling. The triangle represents, in the common sense, something perfect, a kind of ideal figure that is difficult to observe in reality. But, well, on the other hand, I find this one, more powerful and closer to reality. This is an animation that reproduces a problem known to physicists, the free body problem. In simple terms, the problem is how can we study the interaction between among free bodies in motion bound together by the force of gravity. Okay, for those of you who are familiar with the so-called chaos theory, this is not an easy problem to solve because what we know is that the interaction between more than two bodies produces a chaotic result. And in an environment considered probabilistic, which is far from the concept of linearity. If this sounds strange to you, don't worry. All you need to know is that the theory of non-linear systems, studied by statistical physics, has over the years drawn the attention of social sciences because today we know that social phenomena, the interaction among different subjects, are ruled by the laws of complexity. This does not mean that it is a completely disordered relationship but it's something complex that can be studied in a non-linear, non-deterministic way, and above all, in descriptive terms. I'm gonna. Okay. Right. Let's go back to our slide show. All right. Well, here we are. Let's take a step back and talk about something apparently orderly: the therapeutic environment. Once or twice a week, sometimes more, we, the therapists, have in the treatment room subjects with special needs, deficiencies, resources, and demands from family. Sometimes we are seen as the ones who have the ability to solve problems. And this is certainly something that boosts the therapist's self-esteem, but it's a trap at the same time. This is why we need to broaden our perspective, first of all, by seeing ourselves as part of the process that promotes the improvement of our children's and young people's competencies and strategies. In our perspective, the therapeutic environment represents something artificial, because we select the lacking cognitive functions and we try to improve them. Sometimes we work along with families to create an alliance aimed at improving the adaptive capacity of the subject. I said a moment ago that the therapy room is an artificial environment. And what makes it artificial? The setting itself. From our perspective, being able to create a network is one of the fundamental steps to make our work generalizable and lasting. And we start from families. Okay. Well, but the ease which we approach the family should not be considered something that automatically facilitates the therapy. Also, an alliance has its pitfalls, its traps, and we are the first to build pitfalls, because sometimes we do not have a precise idea of what an alliance means. What does it mean? Sharing experiences, listening to the needs of a child and or parents, sharing strategies for children's improvement. I'm sure that if I asked each one of you what you mean by alliance with the family, we would get many different answers. All of them are reasonable, valid, all of them supported by solid experience. And what about when we add to the relationship with families, the relationship with schools? We enter into a relationship with micro-societies that have their own degree of stability, a certain structure and function. And the relationship is absolutely dynamic. And even if we try to bring our beliefs, we will always find ourselves caught between determinism and complexity. This absolutely dynamic relationship could be seen as the humanistic version of the free body problem, which, in its original form, consists in calculating, given the initial position, mass and velocity of free bodies. Okay. A very complex problem that must be approached in statistical and non-deterministic terms. Since free bodies influence each other and give rise to mutual perturbations. Now, back to us, very often we find ourselves face to face with three apparently independent systems that could each exist separately and independently. But we know that this is not the case, because each one plays a decisive role in influencing the response of the subject, that is, the children of your young people, okay? Young people will take care of. Well, let's see this. This one. Okay. As you can see from this animation, we are in front of a sort of a dance that revolves around a center of gravity that is nothing but the child, or the young person who is at the center of this triangle. Why is it moving? because relationships, as well as social relationships in general, interactions between individuals are characterized by a non-linear dynamism. We all have the experience of working with students or patients that is more like this animation, than a line that proceeds without stumbling upon disturbances. And sometimes we seem to be making great strides, but then all of a sudden we notice a regression. Or vice versa, from a situation that seems critical to us, we discover that something else at school or in the family, there have been improvements. And personally, I sometimes receive congratulations from a family of some teachers because they saw improvements, while at the same time I had doubts about the progress of the therapy. Of course, the opposite situation has also happened. I thought I was seeing progress, improvements, and then I realized that outside the therapy room, there were not many signs of improvement. This is to tell you that our perspective must take into account this metaphor taken from non-linear dynamic systems. Systems characterized first of all by an impossibility to determine exactly the outcome of our work, but the possibility, on the other hand, of determining a probability. If you notice in this animation, we find 3 points that do not wander randomly, but they determine those kinds of trajectories that Prigogine defined the edge of chaos. Well, we must then think that evolving systems, and our students, our children are evolving systems, go through the stages of growth in a non-linear way, through what we might call phase transitions. These transitions have the characteristic of being abrupt, fast. They are evolutions that jump from one moment to the next and sometimes leave us perplexed about our work. And we often work with a linear point of view, expecting small progress each time. And instead, most of the time, we see unexpected changes. Well, in this picture, we see what it's all about. This one shows us what happens in evolving non-linear systems when we modify the value of a given parameter. We see that up to a certain point we can predict what will happen, but we arrive at a certain point where the possibilities multiply, resulting in a spectrum of states that we could not initially foresee. In this diagram, we see an image taken from the studies of Ilya Prigogine, Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1977, in which a phase transition is represented. The basic idea is that changes occur in a non-linear way. After long periods where nothing happens, in which there are no particular things or things going on, the phase transition is that situation when a chaotic moment leads to a new organization of the system. Now, I think for many of you this sounds familiar. What happens when we talk about change is that a series of factors function as inputs, leading to a reorganization of the system through chaotic moments. It's up to us as professionals to be able to identify those moments of crisis, chaotic moments, which can lead to a new degree of complexity. Back to our dynamic interaction among the 3 vertices of the dynamic triangle: therapist, family, and school. We see that all 3 contribute to modify the central system, the children, through a dynamic interaction. When we talk about inputs, we are talking about a constant dynamic relationship that leads to reorganization and evolution. Well, what does this complicated interaction among these three subjects lead to? To a complex system characterized by self-organization, the process for which coherence develops out of apparent random interaction among individual units. In other words, think about the interaction among therapists, families, and school. Sometimes this relationship seems quite complicated, but we can also recognize patterns of interaction, and try to work on those patterns, try to influence the quality of this relationship. Self-organization means that we are not in front of something totally chaotic, but instead something that has its rules, and the ability to figure out the pattern is up to us. And now emergence, radical transformation in a system due to interaction among its constituent components. This is the core of change. Emergence means that a change occurs sometimes unpredictably because of the interaction among the components of a system. The quality of alliance leads to the emergence of a new interaction. It's up to us to recognize what leads to new patterns, to the emergence of new patterns. One of the challenges in future research is, in my opinion, to figure out what are the elements of a good change versus an adaptive change. Well, the edge of chaos. Critical states in systems due to a repeated exposure to certain input conditions, creating a tension that results in a sudden transformation. Who gives inputs? Every component of the system. This is the answer. We, as therapists, are required to become aware of the quality of the interaction and manipulate it in order to create a new level of relationship. This is the role of professionals involved in the healing process, being the catalysts that transform the system. And the last one, autopoiesis. The ongoing self-realization of a system through interaction predisposes system to self-preservation. Well, this is the goal of mediators, therapists, teachers, to create a system that preserves itself through the time. Autopoiesis, a term that comes from two authors from Chile of the 70s, 80s, Maturana and Varela, means creating a new structure starting from the activity and the vision of therapists. It's the foundation of the stability of every society and system, and we see it every day. Autopoiesis means a system that keeps itself alive, that keeps going with its rules and habits. It's up to us to decide if these rules are adapted for our children or not. Well, I like to think that these four concepts may underpin our ability to understand and interpret the interaction between those involved in the care of children, therapists, teachers, other people. And sometimes it's complicated to find ourselves interacting with multiple subjects. But this is our duty. A meta-theoretical framework that gives us a sense of what we are doing is the basis for understanding, and in the sense of predicting the quality of the interaction. And the meta-theoretical framework is the theory of complex systems. I want to conclude this presentation with a quote by the Italian physicist Giorgio Parisi. His works on complexity led him to the Nobel Prize in 2021. Everyday life is complex in the sense that complexity is the foundation of biological systems as well as social systems. Our brain is also a complex system. And it's up to us, researchers, workers, to discover the patterns of complexity, the quality of an interaction, and try to see the world in a different way. Something that can take us beyond the trap of reductionism and simple determinism. So, here are some references from for you. I hope you find this one's inspiring and useful, and I'm very glad to be here with you. Thank you.